Good morning, everybody. This is Ed Avis speaking. I'm the Executive Director of the NCA and Managing Director of IRgA, and I want to welcome you to this event today. We are going to learn about how to create an ADA compliant website. This is a very important issue for two reasons. Mainly because you clearly want to have your website be accessible to everybody, whether they have a disability or some other reason that they have a hard time using a regular website. And second, because there are some members of the associations who have been involved in lawsuits because of this issue. So if you can cut them off at the pass by setting up your website correctly, that's a good thing. This event is a joint event between IRgA and NCA, so I want to welcome members of both groups here. Thank you. Both of you know, both groups know Brandon Lilly, our presenter today. Brandon's a member of the NCA, and he has provided educational events to both associations. So we are very fortunate to have Brandon here today. Brandon owns a costume shop, Life of the Party, in Fort Collins, Colorado, and he's a consultant on web issues and web marketing and things like that. So he really knows what he's talking about. And those of you who have attended one of his events will know that for sure. If you have questions, you are welcome to ask questions. Just use the little questions tab on your Zoom panel, and we'll put them to Brandon either when they come in or at the end. And lastly, this event is being recorded, so you can watch it later if you would like, and I will post it on both websites so that we can look at it there. All right, and with that, Brandon, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm glad to, I would say glad to see everybody here, but I actually can't see anybody other than Ed. And as much as I love Ed, I wish I could see all of you guys in person. Hopefully this webinar is going to be useful, and it's going to be something that everybody finds some value in. Please feel free to use the Q&A, use the chat function, anything like that. We'll definitely carve out some time a little bit after, so that we can talk about that. And I will say, kind of before we get started, this is all kind of information that I've learned myself. I have done training and teaching on it before, but your mileage may vary. Okay, so we'll put that there. Let me go ahead and share my screen here real quick, and hopefully everybody can see that. So we're going to be talking about different ways to achieve ADA compliance. This is a guide specifically for the WCAG 2.1 for small businesses. So first off, who am I? I actually began my career in small business marketing pretty much by accident about 16 years ago. I've held a lot of different positions in a lot of different organizations working with businesses that are, I'm the only person in the department to running a department of 40 to 50 people. I've scaled businesses, up to $100 million, earned a YouTube Silver Play button, was recognized as the 2022 Northern Colorado 40 Under 40 honoree. I've been in the costume world since 2018 when I purchased the Life of the Party, which is a 43-year-old name in the industry. And most recently, I was sued for not having an ADA compliant website. So that's where a lot of this started. That's where a lot of this kind of quote unquote education has come from. So what is the ADA WCAG 2.1? Okay, ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, right? Involves ensuring that the accessibility for all customers. Now, for those of us who have brick and mortar locations or physical stores, places where we offer services and goods, we're all probably fairly familiar with the concept of ADA. You got to have your counters at a certain height. Your aisles have to be, I believe it's 36 inches. You've got to, if you're, not grandfathered into some sort of city clause and you've got 2 stories, you've got to have a way for people to get up there. Basically, you want to make sure that everybody has the same opportunity, regardless of ability or lack thereof. But did you know that these requirements also apply to your websites. They apply to your websites, they apply to your digital communications, they apply to your emails, they apply to everything like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the WCAG 2.1, the importance of it, different pitfalls to look out for, and steps that you can take to implement them on your website. Now, I'm going to say this because I think it's very important. I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is personal anecdotes that I have learned through going through a lawsuit specifically about this, targeting small businesses, and what I have learned over 16 years of helping build websites and consulting for small business and things like that. I'm not a lawyer, not legal advice. I think it's important for us to know that. So, the ADA mandates accessibility for all individuals. We all know that. The WCAG, which is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and 2.0 is just the version that we're kind of on right now, provides a little bit more of a framework for making web content more accessible. So when we're talking about accessibility, we're talking about people who have vision impairment or maybe a cognitive processing. Maybe there's a physical impairment where they can't operate a traditional mouse or a keyboard or something like that. The ADA requires that those people still have the same access to your website, your services, and your products as anybody else. So we want to make sure that everything is accessible. They can navigate it, they can utilize it, and they can make purchases from you, because that's really what we're talking about here. So compliance is not just going to be a legal requirement, but it also does really work with your brand. It affects how people perceive you, especially regardless of the industry that you're in. There's always going to be a voice in the neighborhood, or there's going to be a kind of a concept or a thought or a belief or a feeling behind your brand. And if your brand is accessible, there are different studies that show that not only does that increase your sales among the marginalized communities, but it also increases sales, goodwill, and brand awareness amongst the general community. So not only is this good just because you should and you're legally required to, but it can also increase sales and customer satisfaction across the board, not just with disabled communities. Now, recently, and this is not why I was affected, and I will go into that a little bit, Colorado, the state of Colorado, where I'm actually located, set a precedent as the very first state to mandate that state and local government websites adhere to web accessibility standards. So they became the first ones to pass that. I believe it was passed in 2022, 2021. And as of July, I believe it was July 1st, this year, all government websites, state and local, are required in Colorado to meet these guidelines. Interestingly enough, the federal government has also followed suit with this. And as of this year, they have mandated that over the next 2 to 3 years, depending on the size, every state and local government is going to need to, and all federal government websites, forms, contact information, everything like that, also adhere. Now, I personally think that the writing is on the wall that this is going to become a legally mandated and therefore required and actionable requirement for all small businesses. If we're already seeing this come through at state and federal and local government levels, it is going to very quickly become something that is absolutely required, just like paying taxes, as a part of small business. Now, prior to this happening with Colorado, and prior to the federal government kind of getting involved and also saying that all of their sites also need to be compliant, the Department of Justice stated that all websites that provide public accommodations is anything that provides goods or services, which is pretty much every website. It could be a roofer, it could be a retailer, it could be a lawyer, it could be anybody in between. If you're providing goods or services, the Department of Justice considers you a public accommodation website, and you have to comply with ADA Title III, which includes the WCAG 2.1 requirements. That's what the Department of Justice thinks. The issue with that and why a lot of these lawsuits are happening is because up until a couple months ago and still today, there's no particularly legal mandate for small businesses because the Department of Justice considers anybody that provides a goods or a service to be a public accommodation. That means that every website is at risk for an ADA Title III or a non-ADA compliant lawsuit. From a legal perspective, public accommodation is generally considered to be federal, state, local government. It's supposed to be interpreted. It originally was to be for what does the government provide? A public accommodation, a library, a public school, something like that. Those would all be affected. The Department of Justice decided that if you're providing a service at all, this includes the private sector. Because of that, that is what has opened up the massive amounts of lawsuits that are coming through to small businesses and the massive amount of losses that are being taken by small businesses that are affected by this. So that's something to consider. Is the Department of Justice already considers all websites providing goods and services, small business, private sector, federal, local government, doesn't matter. They consider them to be under Title III of ADA, including WCAG 2.1 compliance. Now that we are seeing states and the federal government say in even stronger terms that this is something that they are going to begin to enforce themselves, this, in my opinion, is going to be something that is going to become completely enforceable and therefore going to be something that is you're able to be sued about as you would be normally if you were not ADA compliant in your physical location. This is coming down the pipe, in my opinion, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. So having a compliant website is mission critical for most businesses. Lawsuits are on the rise, too. In fact, they've increased 300% since 2018. 4,600 lawsuits were filed in 2023, which was a 42% increase since they were filed in 2023. 42% increase since 2022. I'll have to fix my slide here. They are continuing to increase, and these are primarily targeting small businesses. Now, if you Google ADA compliance lawsuit Domino's, I believe it was Domino's, you'll see that that was a landmark case a couple of years ago. The app or the pizza tracker, I think, was the main part of that. It wasn't compliant with ADA. If you were blind or had color blindness or things like that, you couldn't actually see or utilize the tracker, and that became a massive lawsuit. Most of these lawsuits that are coming through are what I would consider to be drive-by lawsuits. They are specifically targeting small businesses. They are usually from folks that are out of state and have located the website. And most, in fact, the last stat that I saw was that 40 to 50% of these lawsuits are coming from 1 to 2 legal teams. They've found that it's an incredible way to make money. There's nothing you can do to fight against it because it's incredibly expensive. And they'll file in states that are incredibly friendly to the Department of Justice interpretation that public accommodations are including all websites. That's New York, Texas, and California. You do not have to be located in any of those states. Your website just has to be accessible in them. So if your website is online and it's accessible in any of those states, you are at risk of being sued by any one of these drive-by lawsuits. That's what happened to me. Little backstory on it. Can't talk about it too much because my lawyer says that I can't, but we received a letter stating that an individual had attempted to make a purchase on our website, but was unable to because of the following reasons. And they sent me probably an 80-page document on what the quote-unquote following reasons were. The following reasons were a scrape of my website by AI bot, identifying everything that would go against WCAG 2.1. It could be anything from a missing title tag to an image that didn't load properly to improperly formatted text. And for all these reasons, this customer was unable to make a purchase. Because they were unable to make a purchase, they were unable to attend the event that they wanted to attend. And as such, they were discriminated against by you and your business. Therefore, we are suing you for damages. We're suing you for emotional damages. We're suing you for not being compliant with ADA and WCAG 2.1 guidelines. And they filed in New York. They're like, you can obviously go to New York and have a trial by jury if you want. You can also choose to settle with us, and it was a very large amount, or you can try to fight it. After a lot of conversations with a lot of different lawyers, most of them said it's not worth fighting. It's not worth paying the amount they're asking for, and they know that they're going to ask for an aggressive amount. But this is not worth fighting. My fees will be more expensive than this, and you'll still have to pay them anyway, because precedent has been set that even if you win an ADA lawsuit, you are still responsible to pay the other person's legal fees, which is why these lawyers are so interested in making this happen, which is why we're seeing so many lawsuits continue to increase. It's a money-making opportunity for them. Obviously, this is what I'm saying is not you should be compliant. I should have been compliant. I should have done more research and known more about it, and I could have protected myself and made different choices in how my website was built. But that's not taking away the fact that this is very much a money-making, scheme for lawyers and their quote-unquote defendants. So we definitely want to think about that. This is just going to get worse for small businesses. So keep that in mind. Now, when we're talking about what is WCAG, it's built on 4 principles. Your website needs to be perceivable, it needs to be operable, understandable, and robust. Those are obviously hype terms. They don't really mean anything on their own. But each principle kind of contains more of its own information, more of its own content, and that's important to recognize. That's important to kind of break that down and look at it. Now, I will be, and I'll send this slide deck to Ed after the fact. It's got more resources, got a couple of links, things that you can look at. The WCAG 2.1 guidelines are robust. It's also only been recently that the government and the DOJ have looked at the WCAG and said, yes, these are enforceable. Up until this point, the WCAG have been effectively guidelines at best, suggestions at best. Now it is being utilized and focused on more as these are the standards. Okay, so it's gone from suggestion to standard. In fact, right now, WCAG 2.2 is being tested. It should be focusing a lot more on apps. So a lot more app information. So 2.1, what they call 2.1 AA is the standard that the government is holding itself to, and that's the standard that we would, as small businesses, want to hold ourselves to as well. So I'll be providing more of that information for those of you that would like to read up on it. So we say content needs to be perceivable, okay? That includes all text. Everything that somebody is going to be seeing, ingesting, reading, and this includes text alternative. This is the phrase: text alternatives for non-text content. That means all of your images, every single image on a website, via whether it's a logo or a product image or a certification or a profile picture of yourself, needs to be viewable without looking at the image. So imagine blind and you're using a screen reader. What a screen reader does is it looks at the website and then it describes the website top to bottom. So if at the very top left-hand corner is your logo, and your logo file name is just a string of letters and numbers, .jpg, the screen reader doesn't know what to do with that. Now, if the title of the file is the life of the party logo, the screen reader knows what that is. It can interpret and identify that it's a logo, and it can skip that when it's trying to read the screen to somebody who has vision impairment. If you don't rename all the file names, that's fine. Alt text is available for every single image on a website, but it is all manual. Every single part of this is going to be a manual process for the most part, as a part of building or optimizing the website. So when we talk about perceivable, we need to talk about specifically being able to perceive things via a screen reader if you have a vision impairment. Okay, so the adaptable layouts, whether they're looking at it on a phone or they're looking at it on their computer or they're using a tablet or something like that, the website needs to adapt to that screen size. This has been standard in web building for years. In fact, Google made it a requirement for ranking a couple of years ago, and they've really been cracking down on it recently. If your website is not adaptable, it's not going to rank. If it doesn't scale, it's not going to rank. It's going to lose rank. And if it doesn't scale, it's not ADA compliant. So there's a lot of reasons to do that. Operable navigation. Let me make sure I didn't see it. There we go. Websites have to be operable, meaning you have to be able to navigate the website without requiring specific timings and allowing customers to use keyboards versus a mouse or some other type of peripheral that allows them to interact with the website. So when you say without requiring specific timings, this is sliders. Sliders are a huge problem. They've been a problem for years from an SEO perspective. They've been a problem for years from a website optimization perspective. And now it's been identified that they're a massive problem from an ADA perspective because of the timing required to, my screen reader has now read this information on this image to me. I would like to interact with it. It has already moved on to the next screen. I can't interact with it until it comes back around again. So there's a timing issue when we talk about these sliders, in addition to standard website optimizations. Ensuring that a customer is able to navigate without using a mouse and they can use a keyboard or another peripheral is critical. Most of the time, at least in my experience, folks that do have an impairment or a disability and need one of these tools already have the tools. Now, your website, if it's built on a modern platform, if it's built on Shopify, BigCommerce, one of the headless platforms, Wix and Squarespace to an extent. WooCommerce is more difficult because that's all built from scratch. And if it's hand-coded HTML, CSS, or PHP, you're in a world of hurt because you have to code the website manually to allow for these keyboard interactions. Headless CMS, content management services, or content management software like Shopify or BigCommerce, that's all built in 90% of the time. So it's not something you have to worry about. So navigation is something that is also important. Understandable. Now we're on 3 of 4, right? So content needs to be understandable, meaning it's got to be clear language, predictable navigation, and quick ability to get help if the customer needs it. So having the contact us with clear contact information, not just a form, but also a phone number to call or TTY or something like that, so they can actually get a hold of you. And that clear, easy to understand navigation. We've all been on websites that are impossible to navigate. You get to one page, there's no way to get back to it unless you go through all these links and clicks again. That causes problems because it's difficult to find. That also causes problems from an SEO and optimization perspective. So these are things that kind of work hand in hand. If you want to rank better on Google and search engines, you should also be focusing on ADA compliance because they go hand in hand an awful lot of the time. So it's kind of a win-win. It's a pain especially if you have to kind of do a lot of this manually, but it is worth it in the long run. And then robust. I talked about this a little bit, talking about the headless CMS and service providers like that, like Shopify or BigCommerce. And again, Squarespace to an extent would fit into this. Wix, I tend to avoid at all costs. That's my personal opinion, but I've been doing this for a long time and I don't like their services. GoDaddy website would be another one. Google Sites, those are incredibly basic and typically not useful, especially if we're trying to ensure that we're compliant. So my website was built and is currently being rebuilt, but my website was built on WooCommerce. Now, I did it that way because I'm incredibly particular. I want things the way I want them. I also really enjoy tinkering, and if I break my website, I know that I can fix it. With an all-inclusive like Shopify or BigCommerce, and we're specifically talking about e-commerce platforms there. Those are all, to an extent, closed ecosystems. If it's not built for Shopify, if it's not built for BigCommerce, it won't work. So I decided to hand build my website on WooCommerce because it's open source, it's third party. You can pretty much make it do anything. The problem with that is I did not originally build my website to be ADA compliant outside of just what I would consider basic, common sense kind of principles. Utilizing a platform that has most of this already built into it is probably going to save you a lot of time. If you're already on Shopify or you're already on BigCommerce, you have a step ahead. I have to rebuild my website, and I'm in the process of doing it because I decided that I was going to get too creative in the beginning. Those technologies are also constantly being updated. So even though WooCommerce is open source and third party and it's constantly being updated, it's not holding itself to the same standard as a publicly traded company that would get the pantsuit off of them if their basic platform offering wasn't WCAG 2.1 compliant. So something to consider if you're looking at rebuilding a website or even just launching a new one. Now, one of the requirements of WCAG 2.1 is regular testing. We're going to get into a little bit of a sticky conversation here. Testing is critical to ensure compliance because you might upload something else, you might add new product, you might be running a sale, you might add new employee bios or something to your website, new services, things like that. And you have to be constantly testing the website to ensure that it is up to date and it is meeting the WCAG 2.1 requirements. There are tools out there that you can use that are incredibly helpful, incredibly useful at doing this. Accessibility is probably the one that is the most well-known. Userway, in my opinion, is a stronger technology. They don't have as much of the funding as Accessibility does, but I think they're a better team. There are plenty of other technology and AI-powered ADA compliant scanning tools. And in fact, if you go to any one of those websites or you search for ADA or WCAG 2.1 website scanner, every one of these will give you a free compliance report. That's it's their lead generator, right? So you will get 600 calls afterwards, but this is a really good first step. Some of them also, and Userway, I believe, is one that has this. You can have a monthly scan, or it scans it every 24 hours and gives you a monthly report, something like that, tells you what needs to be fixed and to an extent how to fix it. What these companies also offer is a widget. It's an overlay. It just sits on your website, and it allows people to interact with that widget and turn on the screen reader, turn on keyboard interaction, keyboard navigation. It allows them to change the colors of your website if they are if they get overstimulated by color and they need to make it monochrome or something like that. These widgets offer the ability to do all of that. The problem is none of those widgets actually make you compliant. Now, they have a lot of marketing terminology stating that you'll be certified. The compliance is promised or it's guaranteed. UserWay even has a $10,000 if you get sued, will cover up to $10,000 of your costs. By the way, the initial lawsuit against me was for far more than that, so that's not going to cover, that's not going to cover much. All of these widgets offer and promise the same thing. The problem is they don't actually solve the root core of the issue. They also have a tendency to interact poorly with software that is previously installed, screen readers, peripherals, color muters, and things like that. They tend to conflict negatively with things that users already have installed on their home device. There is also, and I wasn't able to, I didn't have time to put it in the slides here. There's also a lot of data that shows that by installing these widgets on your website, it's a dog whistle for people to come and sue you. After installing one of these widgets on your website, the risk of you getting sued skyrockets because, one, they do not solve the problem. And two, it shows to these lawyers and folks who know they can get away with it that you tried and you've already failed, so they are going to win no matter what. This is a big problem. Do not, in my professional opinion, unless you're using it as a scanning device only to ensure testing and compliance, do not install one of these widgets and wash your hands of it and say you're good. It does not solve the root cause. Very important. So small businesses face all kinds of challenges, and we know this. Some of the ones that happen the most on the websites are forums that are inaccessible. So like contact us forums, sales forums, quotes, things like that. Others is going to be poor color contrast. That's actually one that got me. One of our primary brand colors is purple, and the purple that we use is considered a non-compliant color because it does not contrast well with really any other color. I like it because it blends well with other colors, which apparently is a problem. So there's a little bit of a rebranding that we're going to have to go through to change our coloring just a little bit. And lack of alt text, alternative text for images. And that's what we talked about for screen readers. If you're going through and you're naming or naming images exactly what they are, that will count as alt text. If you're not naming images exactly what they are, and I mean exactly, then you need to go into your website in the back end and add alt text to every image explaining exactly what it is. For somebody like me with 10,000 products on their website, that is a huge undertaking. There are some AI tools that will help, but they may or may not get it right, and you're still going to have to go through and check all of them to make sure it's actually working. So those are some of the real common ones. Obviously, the other ones are going to be not built on an adaptable technology and just generally old tech that's inaccessible. So implementing these changes, it could be something where if you're like me, you've got most of the experience needed. It'll take me a very, very long time. It would probably take me longer to train my team up on how to do this than it would for just me to take the time to do it. But if you have web developers, graphic designers, SEO experts, marketing experts, anybody like that on your team or accessible to you, this is definitely going to be a conversation to have with everybody, because it will require all those disciplines in order to make sure that your website is compliant. So kind of the conclusion at the end of this is that it's difficult to implement, It's already being required for federal, state, and local governments. The DOJ already has made the statement and set the precedent that this does apply to small businesses, even though currently legally is not stated that way. But I believe it's coming down the pipe. I would say within the next year, maybe two, this will be required for all small businesses if they want to do business, especially outside of their state. So I think that this is something that we're all going to need to be doing. But by prioritizing this kind of inclusivity and this accessibility, small businesses of all shapes and sizes get more access to customers. They get better ranking on search engines and Google, and current brand awareness, brand sales, and customer satisfaction goes up across the board anyway. It's a cost of effort, cost of time, but it's definitely worth doing. So, that's me. You can always reach out to me, shoot me an email, give me a call, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have these conversations and kind of give my experience, talk a little bit more about things I've done or am doing to my own sites to kind of get ahead of this. But yeah, that's me. Thank you guys so much. I'm hoping that there's a couple questions here and things that we can talk about.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Brandon. Super good info. Folks, we do have a couple questions. Go ahead and ask more, but I'm going to give these to Brandon. I think that the first one was already answered, Brandon, by what you said, but let me read it to you. It says, will adding the ADA plugins on WordPress be enough to cover ADA compliance?
Not even close. Not even close, unfortunately. They're all, and I mentioned this, they're all overlay widgets.
Okay.
So they lay on top of the website and they interact with basically the user interface. They add a new interface on top of the interface that's already existing. That doesn't solve the core issues of missing title tags, missing alt tags on images, sliders, navigation that is not conducive for screen readers to understand or for other peripherals like keyboards and things like that to navigate. They cause a lot more problems than they solve. They're great they're great for the ongoing testing. And they're great for identifying issues because they will scan the website, and these are the same kinds of tools that these lawyers and whatnot are using to say this is everything that's wrong with your website. So they're fantastic at that. But adding those overlays has proven time and time again to cause more problems, and they lead to more lawsuits. I will say, I believe it's UserWay. They have it's more expensive, but they have a monthly plan where the widget sits on your website. It gives them that interface. It identifies problems, reports the problems back to their team, and their team works to fix it. So then the problem is actually being fixed on the back end in real time. That's excellent. It's also pretty expensive, if I remember correctly.
That's a follow-up question, Brandon. So the overlay doesn't work. That's not, you've made that clear. But if you hire one of these services that so-called certifies that you're compliant, and is that something different, right?
Yeah, because you're solving the problem in the back end. So again, Accessibility does have, and they're more well known. They're the Kleenex of the brand, right? They're more well known, whereas other ones like UserWay, and there's a couple others I don't remember. They started as like web builders essentially. So having a widget that people install for free that sends them reports and says, here's everything wrong with your website is a great lead gen for them because their core competency is fixing this kind of stuff on websites. Whereas Accessibility is only an app.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you would have to give them access to your website, to the back end, right? For them to do those.
Yes, you would.
Now, can you spell UserWay?
USERWAY.
Okay, so just like it sounds. And what about Accessibility?
Yeah, accessibility. That's going to be a different one. That is ACCESSIBE.
Okay, great.
And I'll send over some of these resources and some of these links to you, Ed, if we want to send out an email
Yeah,
afterwards with the slide and a couple other links.
for sure. Now, Brandon, there are a couple other questions, but let me ask another follow-up that I have
Mhm.
been thinking about myself. An NCA member I met at a show, a vendor member. Okay, so this company had, like you, thousands of images.
Mhm.
This member explained that, just like you said, they got sued after having thought that they had fixed it by getting things so-called certified.
Mhm.
Now, and then he said the same thing. He said that they figured out that this law firm just went around the web and saw that, oh, you think you're certified, and then
Yep.
they did it.
Yep.
Now, I didn't obviously know what you know when I was talking to this guy. Do you think he meant that he only had the overlay thing going, or did he?
Yes.
Okay, so he
Yeah.
didn't
That's
actually
that.
use.
That's what I would say.
Okay.
Because that's part of the marketing pitch is
Hmm.
that you're certified compliant. Well, certified by who? There's no actual certifying body that says that you're WCAGA or WCAG 2.1 compliant. There's no certifying body of that. The closest you can get is going to be W3C, but they're still that's not a government website. That's not a government entity. They're just the ones who came up with the WCAG guidelines.
Got it. Okay.
But
So
they don't certify you as being compliant. Yeah, so there's really no such thing.
so the bottom line is, if you use Userway and pay them the big amount to
Hmm.
go into your website and actually fix the stuff, then you should be okay. I'm just trying to think of an
Yeah, so it
easy answer to
again
this.
again uh, because there's no specific law giving the exact guidelines to small businesses, there's a little bit of ambiguity here.
Yeah.
But what's been proven, and there's precedent for this, is that if you can show that you are actively pursuing WCAG 2.1 guidelines, including testing, and that's the important part. That means that you are actively working towards compliance, and someone tries to sue you, but you can show that over the past 6 months you've been working towards compliance and you have the testing results and reports to show it, and that how it's getting better and better and better every month. There's really nothing that they can do at that point because you are actively working towards compliance.
Okay.
If you have not been working towards compliance, or you don't have that testing, you don't have that history, it kind of becomes a moot point because you didn't solve the problem.
So if you get one of these letters
Mm-hmm.
from a lawyer and you have been doing what you say,
Mm-hmm.
testing, improving,
Yep.
do you tell the lawyer that, or do you go and fight it? But that's going to be expensive, right?
Yep, it'll be expensive. One thing that I've seen businesses start doing is they are publishing their own results. So
Oh,
you set up what's called an accessibility statement on your website, which basically says, we're actively working towards this. Here's the steps we've taken. If you have a problem, you can contact us. And here's our history of testing.
okay. So maybe to hopefully cut these guys off.
It cuts it off at the pass because it's not really worth the effort for them at that point. Because if you did have the money to fight it, they would lose.
Uh-huh. Got it.
So
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. This is a little bit of a wild west, which is why my prediction is it's going to get harder before it gets better, but it's not going to get easier.
All right. Let me give you a couple of these questions. I think attendees, I think that Brandon has answered the question about what type of widgets he is talking about. but let me read another question here. This attendee says, if I'm remembering correctly, you said you would avoid Wix when it comes to ADA compliance. Did I hear that incorrectly? Or if I'm right, why avoid Wix and pick another service like Squarespace?
So I'm going back on my experience as a digital marketer and the past 16 years of working with different web platforms. Uh, Wix is about the weakest platform. In fact, I remember a couple of years ago they made a core update to their software to their platform, and it got every single one. Every website that was built on Wix was deleted from Google, gone. They're not a very competent team, but they are a great marketing team. Their technology is bare bones, basic at best. So, based on my experience with them, uh, I don't trust that they are building to WCAG standards as well as they could be. They're they outsource everything that they do. Everything is piecemealed together. In fact, I used to work for a company called Madwire, and they approached us to buy some of our technology to um, and this never went anywhere. But they reached out to me because I was a senior brand director, and they were like, "We'd like to buy part of your technology so we can integrate it into ours." They don't build anything themselves; they just buy and piecemeal together. That's my personal experience. I don't like to work with them very often. Squarespace is better because they started as, and they were one of the very first drag and drop website builders. Like they might have been one of like literally the first. Um, Squarespace has moved away from websites and more into payments because there's a lot more money in payments. So that technology is also faltering a little bit. Whereas again, BigCommerce is focusing very heavy into the headless CMS aspect. Basically, you can take their technology and plug it in anywhere. And Shopify builds everything as a walled garden. They don't want you using anything other than what they build. So I like those two technologies a lot more. They're a lot more robust. And because at least Shopify, I think BigCommerce also are publicly traded, they are held to pretty high standards because that's all that they do. Wix has so many owners that I don't particularly like or trust their team.
So BigCommerce and Shopify.
Yeah,
Okay.
those are my two favorites currently. There's
Okay.
other ones out there, including smaller organizations, smaller companies that do build to this. Um, there's a web agency here in Colorado that all they do is build ADA accessible websites. That's their whole thing.
That was going
Their
to be
seat.
another question. Yeah, Brandon, could you, is it feasible if you, could you just hire a web guy who knows what he's doing and say, hey,
Yep.
whatever your hourly fee is, I want you to go in and make sure everything's right.
Mhm.
And every month do that for me, blah, blah, blah.
Yes. What I would not do is hire one person to do it.
Oh,
I would have, and I would not. Don't go to like Fiverr. You're not going to like the results because that's a meat grinder, right?
well, how would it, let me follow up that then. How would you find such a developer?
Mhm. I would download one of these widgets, or not download the widget, but I would do one of their tests to have you know their compliance tests, right? That's your basic start. So have them do a compliance test, look at it. If you're lucky, it's like 6 things that you can fix. Oh, I can change that name. Oh, I can fix that link. Oh, this is easily solvable. If you're like me and it was 80 pages long and started to go outside of my skill set, far into development, CSS, and PHP, then you have to start talking to somebody else. Now, the easiest way to do that is to find a local web building agent, a boutique agency is where I would go. I'd go to a boutique agency, show them, and tell them, here's all the things wrong. Quote me on this. Give me monthly, because you're going to want somebody who is a developer, You're going to want, to fix any coding issues on the back end. You're going to want somebody who's a web designer to fix any design issues or navigation issues. And you're going to want somebody who is the content creator or an actual writer to solve any of the content issues and alt tags and things like that. It is very, very difficult to find somebody who can do all of those things that would be less expensive than finding an agency who employs people to do all of those things.
Okay. Now, is there an advantage to doing that? By that, I mean hiring a boutique agency versus using UserWay to buying their full service?
I'd get a quote.
Okay.
It probably depends on the website and what's wrong, if we're being honest.
Okay. But UserWay could do that.
Based on my research, yes. I've never experienced their service, but it does look like something that's what they were kind of built on.
Okay.
So that's where they make their money. The widgets, that little monthly, that means nothing to them. They make their money on solving the problems.
Got it. Cool. Now there's a question here. Where do we begin the process? Is UserWay the best way? Is that
I would begin the process by having any one of the dozens of apps that are out there or widgets scan the website.
okay?
That's where I would start. That's going to give you a much clearer indication of what's wrong. If you have a 6-page service website or a 30-page service website, it's going to be a lot easier to just solve those problems yourself, or find somebody who has the multi-talent to solve those issues. If we're talking 30 pages, that's stuff that I'm not a developer, but I could fix. That's kind of I've got the background to do it. My website's 10,000 pages. It doesn't matter my background. There's not enough me to go around to fix all of to go through that. So it's going to depend pretty heavily. I would start with one of those reports.
Okay.
Kind of identify from that if it's something that you know how to do, or if it's something that even a friend of a friend, sometimes it's not that difficult if there's only a couple of minor issues. Once you start getting into the bigger e-commerce sites, that's where it starts to become a problem, in my experience. And that's where you want to find an agency or a specialist who actually works with these kinds of things and does that. Like I said, there's an agency here in Colorado. Their CEO is brilliant. She built their entire company. I think they're 30 or 40 people now. The whole company, their entire job is building ADA compliant websites. And then most of her profit comes from maintaining that at a monthly cost after the fact.
And what's the name of that company?
I'll have to pull it up. I'll send that over to you in a link.
Great. We have another comment. Paul is asking that we post, in addition to the presentation, that we include this discussion. And yeah, we'll do that, Paul. What I'm going to do is post the whole recording here so that you people can watch it again. And in the newsletter, both associations' newsletters, I will write a little bit of a summary of what we talked about. I can't write it all, but I'll do a little summary and then link back to this conversation. I think we've answered the other question. There's a couple questions on which one is the best, but I think we've kind of touched on that.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't really matter which widget is the best, because the widgets are part of the problem.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter which widget is best. Any one of them is going to give you a fine report. Any one of them will do just fine for giving you that testing history. Any one of them will do that, no problem. Like I said, Accessibility has better marketing. I think UserWay has a better team. That's my personal opinion. There's dozens of other ones out there that could be better than both of them combined. The goal should be fixing the problem at its source, and none of those widgets are going to do that unless you're working with a widget that has a team that will fix it. Not AI fix it, because I've seen some of that in their new marketing. Oh, AI fixes to your website. Actually fixes it.
Okay.
That's the goal. Whether you use a boutique agency or you hire one of these widget companies to manually go in and solve the problem, I don't think it matters necessarily. But the source of the problem is what needs to be solved. That's the only way to protect yourself.
Attendees, I don't think there's any new questions here. If I'm wrong, though, please repost your question or ask it in a different way, because I think Brandon has answered all the questions that are lined up here. But if I'm wrong, go ahead and type a new question in, please. Or if you have a different question, by all means, fire away. Brandon, I think at one point, some of us in the NCA, maybe at a board meeting, had a conversation about this and talked about posting on your website. This is our accessibility statement, and you touched on that, but that's not by itself going to do the trick, right? I mean, you got
That's not by itself going to be enough. So, and I will send this link as well. Colorado, who is now requiring this for all state and local governments, on colorado.gov has an accessibility statement. And they reference how to contact them if there's a problem. They reference the standards that they're holding themselves to. They reference the law that they are attempting to follow, right? That bill that went through. So those are all things that are important as a part of it. An accessibility statement can be as simple as: we are aware of the WCAG 2.1 requirements. We, the date of our first scan was X. We're committed to doing X, Y, Z to solve these problems that are known issues. Here is and this is important, direct contact if you have a problem. So a direct phone number or a direct email or both. And then below that, here's a list of our testing history to show that we've been actively working to solve these kinds of problems. That's a Band-Aid, right? But it's as close as you can get to showing that this is something that you've actively been working to solve.
Got it. Well, we do have another question here. We got sued a couple of years ago, and we believe our case got dismissed because it was gone from the court files. Any idea why? All we have is the ADA plugin, but we will hire an agency to fix the root problems. Any thoughts on that?
So I've heard of that happening, and what I had heard was that the lawyer found bigger fish to fry. So they went ahead and filed the document, and then either they looked deeper into it and they're like, this person has no money, so it's not worth it. There's not enough for me to make a case about it, or they found a way easier case to take, and it just made sense for them to just abandon this one.
Got it. All right.
That could be, for all I know, the lawyer died and it never went anywhere.
Right. Got it.
Or the plaintiff got had a change of heart or something. I don't know. It could be any one of those things.
Got it. Great. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for your.
But really quickly, that
Yeah.
just proves the point. We've had what, 15, 18 people on this call.
Yep.
Me and at least one other person have been sued for 8. That's 2 and 18.
Yeah. Right. It's a problem, no question. And I've heard of other.
It's risky.
Other members.
It's risky.
Yeah.
So don't think it can't happen to you, because it certainly can, and
Yep.
we're gonna see it happen more and more, I think.
Great. All right, attendees, we're out of time. Like I said, this will be posted on the website, the recording of it, both websites. And I'll write a little article about this for both newsletters in the next couple weeks, so you can read about it there. Brandon's contact info will be there if you want to reach out to Brandon. And we'll include a link to these places that can help you. So, but it's a serious issue. Brandon, we appreciate your guidance here. Hopefully we will all take your advice and save ourselves. So,
Fingers crossed. Thanks for having me. I
all
really
right, thank
appreciate
you
it.
very much. Thanks, everyone. This ends today's webinar.